On behalf of the Islesboro Forum Committee, welcome to the second program of the 2022 Islesboro Forum Speaker Series. Thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Gayle Jackson. I'll be the moderator for today's program. This is our 30th year of presenting distinguished speakers to the island community. That got a round of applause last week. Why not? After 2 years of presenting the speaker series mostly via Zoom in 2020 and 2021, all our programs this summer will be in person here at the ICC. We will be and are recording the programs, and they will be posted at the islesboroforum.org website a few days, we won't specify exactly how many days, after the program. We are hopeful that last week's program, which was enormously praised for its erudition on the subject of Putin's regime and Ukraine, will be posted by tomorrow morning. You can also find it by going to YouTube. So either one of those options, YouTube or islesboroforum.org. Before we introduce our speaker, I also want to acknowledge and thank the 7 other committee members who work with me on these programs for their excellent support and ideas, and our technical producer, Michael Hutcherson, who most of you know. A round of applause for Michael. Please consider making a donation to the forum in order to keep you on your toes and interested. We have, instead of a basket, we have a goldfish bowl.
I thought people were giving me money.
They might be. You have to sing for your supper, and who knows what will be forthcoming. Our cost for our 6 programs will be about $1,500, so your contributions will be welcome. Our format tonight will be to hear remarks from our speaker relating to the mission, curriculum, and selected programs of the College of the Atlantic, which is located just in our near neighborhood in Bar Harbor, Maine. And then he'll take questions from the audience after his presentation. I will ask longtime Islesboro Forum Committee member Peter Rothschild, whose ideas and vast network have been invaluable to us over the years in identifying outstanding speakers and programs, to introduce our speaker, Darron A. Peter is well acquainted with the College of the Atlantic, as his mother was a trustee and trustee emeritus, or emerita, if we're correct by Latin standards. Maureen, Peter's mother, was instrumental in getting faculty and students to come to Islesboro for many years to teach for a few weeks at the Islesboro School, a program that Peter also coordinated after Maureen's death in 2004. So without further ado, may I ask Peter to introduce Darron. Thank you.
Well, I think it was about 4 years ago, before Michael Hutchinson was involved, and I introduced another speaker, and we also had enormous technical problems getting it to work, and I drove up and down the island at about 80 miles an hour trying to find cables that would fit in this computer. Anyway, I just drove down to the town beach and back to get my laptop, but it didn't have a positive effect, so I'm probably off the committee from now on. I apologize. At any rate, I've been a very, very long supporter, emotionally anyway, with the College of the Atlantic, and as Gayle so kindly said, acknowledged my mother was very, very involved for years and years. It's amazing, that's all I can say. You probably know that not only is our speaker an alum, but so is Shelley Pingree and other people in Maine. It's a unique Maine institution, and it's a tremendous pleasure to have Darron come here and tell us about the College of the Atlantic. And also, I have learned an accomplished, extraordinary fly fisherman, and he was going to tell you a little bit about fishing in Mongolia, of all places. So without further ado, Darron.
Thank you, Peter. I want to make sure everyone knows that the technical problems that we've had are all on my shoulders. Absolutely, Michael was 150% on it, in touch with me. I have something wrong with an adapter, so I am what we're calling winging it tonight. And it is really tough to do because I had 50 slides of the most beautiful images of Mongolia, and then jumping across the world to the College of the Atlantic. But I'm going to have to do my best at just storytelling for a little bit and then open it up to questions. And I think because of the issue with my slides, I'll probably pivot a little bit and speak almost exclusively about College of the Atlantic, because that doesn't rely so much on images. I hope that's okay. How many of you have heard of the College of the Atlantic before tonight? Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Most of the time, there's not nearly that many of hands go up. But the story with COA, for me, starts in 1987, right? So I am a student from from Parsippany, New Jersey, just about 30 miles outside of New York City. And I'm the first person in my family to go off to college. You know, neither of my parents were college-bound, from Irish immigrants here in northern New Jersey. And so when it came time to do that, like, father-son, let's go off and find colleges, my dad was clueless, like, right? The guy had no idea. He knew, though, he was a pub owner in Morris Plains, New Jersey. He owned an Irish pub. And the thing he wanted to make sure was that his son would never be a pub owner, right? And so for him, college was the way to avoid your son being a pub owner. And he knew that his son, Darron, loved the outdoors, right? Grew up in northern New Jersey, but somehow was so inspired by the outdoors. And he had a friend, and his friend's son went to Bowdoin College, right? Everyone knows Bowdoin College, right? And so in my dad's head, remember from New Jersey, Maine was like, it was when you opened the dictionary and saw wilderness, you saw a picture of Maine. Bowdoin was in Maine, it must be a great place. So father and son get in a car and go up to Brunswick, and we get out of the car, of course. And my father, like, his eyes, just like everything opens up for him, and he says, Darron, this is it, right? We found it. Like, look at the ivy growing up the walls, and look at the sports team and the preppy guys and girls running around, and the green, the most beautiful green. And Bowdoin, I've heard the endowment has got to be over $1 billion. This was a long time ago. It was still very high. He said, we've found nirvana, don't you think? And I said, this is really pretty, Dad, but there's this other spot that I've read about. It's just a few hours north. Can we jump in the car and go check it out? So sure enough, we get in the car and we drive up to Bar Harbor and drive in. And has anyone been on the campus at COA? Okay, so some of you will know, when you drive into the main section of campus, one of my slides was this huge whale skull, a finback whale skull. And a finback whale was hit by a ship, and it became the kind of open emblem of the College of the Atlantic. Dad drives in, I step out of the car, I look at the whale skull, and I say, this is it. And my dad is looking around, and he said, what is this place, right? This is not a college. Like, at the time, there were fewer than 200 students at COA. So he's like, what kind of college doesn't have, at least several thousand students? There's no football team. There's no Greek life. There's no quad, with people playing lax and football and whatnot. But in my eyes, I was like, oh my God, this is it. And he said, Darron, tell me, what do you think you're going to do with a degree from this place in human ecology that is a degree that I've never heard of? And I said, Dad, I really want to be a wolf biologist. And which was true. Parents were divorced, and so I lived with my mom, dad, not quite so on to what I was interested in studying. But a picture of my poor father, right? Like, not only was his son going to go off to this college that didn't check any of the boxes in his head for what college was meant to be, but he wants to be a wolf biologist. Like, I felt really bad for my father, actually, on reflection. But he trusted me. And I wound up going to COA. I started in 1988 and I graduated in 1992 with a degree in human ecology. I won this fellowship called the Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, named after the IBM family, Thomas Watson. I was in South America for 2 years, and I wound up, I got a PhD at Tulane University in cultural anthropology. And then I worked for the World Wildlife Fund. And that's where I was going to talk about tame conservation in Mongolia. But get back to Dad for a minute. Eventually he was like, you know what, like, this actually worked for him. Like, he actually got a job. I wasn't a wolf biologist, but I was, at least in the same stretch. And so I spent 10 wonderful years with my wife, Karen, who's here, initially working in the Amazon basin, wonderful, and then for the second half of my decade, working in the Russian Far East, northeastern China, and Mongolia. It was tremendous. I fell head over heels for Mongolia, and sure enough, as Peter mentioned, one of the conservation programs that we worked on was trying to conserve this amazing fish called taimen. And it is a massive member of the salmonid family. And here you have to imagine the incredible photos of huge fish. Sometimes this size can weigh up to 100 pounds. But anyway, as a long-term employee at World Wildlife Fund, one day, as an alum of the College of the Atlantic, I got a note over email that said, we are searching for the next president of the College of the Atlantic. And I said to myself, I loved COA. I mean, it was 4 of the most extraordinary years that I've been through, outside of those with my wife, of course. But 4 amazing, amazing years, and I've kept in close touch. And I said, Karen, I got this idea. I've been at WWF 10 years, that was great. Next phase of my life is going to be as president of the College of the Atlantic. And Karen said, of course, honey, that sounds like a great idea. He's never going to get that job. But like, the poor guy's never going to get the job. But sure enough, after time after time, interview after interview, trips up to COA, I got the job. Now, picture my father again. Wow, like, he's now the president of the college that I had never even trusted. So this was 2011, and so for 11 years, I've been the president of COA, and it's a truly wonderful, wonderful organization, great institution, with a really, really interesting history. And so the history of the college, again, we're only talking 25 miles as the crow flies to our further down east on Mount Desert Island. And MDI has probably a history not totally dissimilar from Islesboro, but the Hudson River Valley School of Painters came to MDI, this is Frank Church and others of his ilk, and started painting the wonderful scenes of Mount Desert Island, and would go back to his home in Philadelphia, New York, Washington, D.C., and people started to get inspired by this amazing place called Mount Desert Island. They were also, in the mid-19th centuries, late 19th century, the cholera epidemics in in both Philadelphia and New York were significant. So they were looking for a place to escape and came to Mount Desert Island in the summer in the 1850s, 60s, and 70s. And like Newport, Rhode Island, and other places on the coast of Maine, Bar Harbor and other hamlets on the island of Mount Desert Island became incredible summer colonies with really vibrant people, artists, politicians, businessmen, all flocking to Mount Desert Island. In 1947, there was a fire that spread across Mount Desert Island and actually burned 16,000 acres. It tore through most of the town of Bar Harbor and all the wonderful summer colonies that were built there in the 1860s, 1870s, up till the 1890s. 90% of them were burned to the ground. And so MDI, generally, and Bar Harbor specifically, went into something of a recession and a depression. And for 20 years, the Rockefeller family actually was thinking about what can we possibly bring to Mount Desert Island to help revitalize a community that was absolutely incredible. And by the end of the 60s, a man named Les Brewer had this idea, and he said, David, we are going to build an educational institution on Mount Desert Island. And through that educational institute, we will bring back the MDI community. Great idea. Turns out, this is where Father Jim Gower comes into the picture. Les Brewer's best friend in high school, played on the MDI, at the time it was the Bar Harbor football team. They were first and second string quarterbacks. Second string quarterback left went off to the war, became a priest, came back to the island in 1968, and the two bumped into each other right on Cottage Street in downtown. And so Les Brewer says, Jim, I haven't seen you in 20 years. I've got this amazing idea. We're going to rebuild Mount Desert Island back to its glory days by bringing an educational institution onto MDI. Father Jim says, Les, that's a great idea. But you know what? I've buried way too many boys in Vietnam. Martin Luther King was just assassinated. Bobby Kennedy Jr. was just assassinated. The Cuyahoga River had caught on fire. Like, the world really seemed to be coming apart at the seams. And Father Jim said, if we're going to build an educational institution, not only are we going to focus on revitalizing Mount Desert Island as a community, but we're going to use education to change the world at large. So Father Jim had this big, big vision. They wound up getting a piece of land, 20 acres, right on Frenchman Bay, right on the Gulf of Maine. And they hired their first president, Ed Kelber. And Ed Kelber was an associate dean at the Harvard School of Education. He had gone off to Nigeria. He had started a school in Nigeria and was hired as the founding president of the College of the Atlantic in 1970. And Kelber said, guys, like, if we're going to address the local community and the globe, we have to recognize that the root of the problem is higher education itself. And we're going to change and reshape the way higher education works right here in this little school called the College of the Atlantic. And so in 1972, the first cohort of students came to COA, and there were 32 students, 4 faculty members, 32 students, tons of dogs, a lot of flannel and wool. The original photo of the first class of 1972, there was so much hair, and we were definitely known locally as that strange alternative, may I say, hippie school. There was a real sense, even though we were a different approach, there was real intellectual integrity from the get-go at the College of the Atlantic. Ed Kelber built that program slowly but surely and continued to bring new faculty, great ideas, and slowly the community began to really embrace COA as an anchor institution, probably like the local K through 12 school in Islesboro has become a real anchor institution for Islesboro. Ed retired. This was 1982. New president came on board, and 6 months after Ed retired, the campus itself burned to the ground. 1983, there was a terrible fire in the center of campus, and COA as an institution almost was snuffed out. And it's very likely Peter's mother was on the back porch of one of our buildings that's called Turrets, that was one of the last of the amazing 1890s structures that didn't get burned in the fire. But the trustees really scratched their head and said, my God, like, was that it? Was that a good 10-year experiment and we have to move on? Thankfully, they didn't. And they brought a new president, Lou Rabineau, who was the chancellor at the University of Connecticut, came all the way up here. Enrollment was down at 90, or the accreditors started to scratch their own head and say, I don't know, is this institution really going to make it? And so only 4 years later is when I got to COA with my dad. So the school, honest to God, was living really hand to mouth. And for me, in my eyes, it didn't matter. Like it meant everything in the world to me. But it was very understandable why my father would be especially skeptical at this time in the history of the college. Anyway, COA is a remarkable place, and now we just celebrated our 50th anniversary, and it's such a wildly different place than when I was there as a student. Currently, we have 350 students, so there are 3 pillars of the college that will remain constant as far as I'm president, and I think as long into the future. And one is the intimacy and small size of the community. There are 350 students total, right? Total. But these students come from 55 different countries in 42 states. So you walk into the dining hall at the College of the Atlantic, and you feel like you're in the middle of the United Nations. It's absolutely amazing. So we've gotten a name for ourselves and are recognized globally for the kind of work we do. Students are not only just from all over the world and all over the United States, but as signing up for an education at COA, they're committed to helping actually shape the College of the Atlantic. So the governance system at COA, we have a set of trustees, but students, staff, and faculty also run the day-to-day operations of the college. They hired me. They determine what the curriculum is. They review the faculty every 8 years as they go through their accreditation system. So students play a really important role in shaping the institution. So the small size and the kind of tight-knit community nature of the college is one key element. The second thing is we will forever remain committed to helping Mount Desert Island be an incredible place. The place, unlike any other institution, absolutely shapes the character of the institution. I like to say we are who we are at COA because of where we are. Our front door reaches right out into the Gulf of Maine, and our back door is right in Acadia National Park. And this isn't just like a nice, pretty campus. It is absolutely gorgeous. But those two regions, the ocean and Acadia National Park, are our laboratory. There are our sports field. We don't have any NCAA sports, but we have the best trail running team in the state of Maine. In terms of sea kayaking, sailing, everything that you can do outside, that is the lifeblood of our academic institution. But it's also, we spend more time, I'm convinced, outside of the classroom than inside. And ours is really an institution that's shaped by our surroundings. That's also true of the institutions and our neighboring institutions. Like to our north is the Jackson Lab. Some people may have heard of the JAX. The JAX is a world-class genetics and genomics lab. Right to our northeast is the MDI Biolab. Both of those institutions offer incredible opportunities in laboratories that a small school like COA could never dream of having. Through our partnerships with those institutions, we can offer our students an amazing array of different benchwork opportunities with the labs. The school system itself, for the past 35 years, we've had a really strong teacher education program and fight way above our weight class in terms of putting teachers in Maine, in the public and in the private school systems. So those, our surroundings make us who we are. And the last, and maybe the most interesting thing about the College of the Atlantic is the degree offerings. There's one degree. Everyone that goes through the College of the Atlantic graduates with the same bachelor's degree that I received. It's a Bachelor of Arts in Human Ecology. And when that shows up on a resume in an employer, they definitely pause and scratch their heads, right? And so a logical question is, well, what is that? And it's a lot harder to define than chemistry as a subject matter or engineering as a practice. But basically, human ecology is the relationship between humans and their natural, built, and social environments. And what we're asking of students is to create their own curriculum around what they're passionate about in order to improve those relationships between the human beings and their natural, built, and social environment. So what does that mean? The curriculum is divided between the environmental sciences, the human studies and humanities, and the arts and design. So what happens is the thread that holds us all together is this passion for wanting to serve the wider world. But some of us approach it through the sciences, some others approach it through education, through law, policy, writing, and others who are more focused on arts and design become graphic designers, theater artists. You would not believe the diversity of what our alumni do. Most people, when they hear the word human ecology, they assume that most of us are studying taimen in Mongolia or tigers in the Russian Far East. But really the breadth of the student work as alumni is extraordinary. You do have the Shelley Pingreys of the world, who is our U.S. Congresswoman from the 1st District. You have Greg Stone, who was the Executive Vice President for Conservation International. You have thousands of people working in the nonprofit sector all over Washington, D.C. and the state of Maine. It's an extraordinary degree that's done really well. And 50 years later, no longer are we living hand to mouth. We actually have an $80 million endowment, which is really pretty significant for a school of 350 students. So as I look into the future, the things that we're going to really lean in on are, I would say, 3 things. We're going to continue to build our endowment because we want students to be able to come to COA regardless of their ability to pay. Most people assume that, oh, this is a small school on the coast of Maine. I bet it's full of rich kids who can pay full cost. That's the furthest thing from the truth. 90% of our students are on some kind of financial aid, and that's the best. It makes for such a diverse group of students. So we want students who are passionate about being at COA regardless of their abilities to pay. The second thing is we're going to really lean in to our oceans. We are the College of the Atlantic, after all. For the first 10 years of the college's existence, everyone tended to say, oh yeah, College of the Atlantic, that's the whale school, right? Because we did a lot of work early on whale ecology. And so for the second chapter of the history of the school, we did our best to say, yes, but we do all these other things. And I think looking forward, I want to say to the world at large that no, like oceans are a core of who we are as an institution. And you are all invited to get a sense of what we're doing in the oceans. July 25th through the 29th, the last week in July, we are putting on our 6th annual College of the Atlantic Summer Institute. And the theme this year is our one and only ocean. And we have 9 sessions throughout the week. You can come to the campus if you like and attend in person. You can also join us remotely if you go to coa.edu/SI. That would have been on my slide here. So we're going to build our endowment so students from all walks of life can continue to come to COA. We're going to lean into our work on oceans, and we are going to begin to franchise the COA model. So here's the idea. Everyone says to me, why would you be just 350 students? Don't you want to increase the impact and grow the student body? And I said, no. Actually that small size is part of the special sauce of the College of the Atlantic. It makes us who we are. We're not trying to be a smaller or version of Colby, Bates, or Bowdoin, as great as those institutions are. My dad, looking down from us above, probably still loves Bowdoin. But being small is part of the special sauce. But we want everyone to be able to go regardless of their abilities to pay. But in order to increase our magnitude, the idea is to take our model and set it down in other places globally. And one place that we've just done that is in Japan, on an island called Osaki Kamijima, that is in an island like Mount Desert Island that is starting to see depopulation and an aging of the community there. And they came to us and said, how can we bring an educational institution to the island of Osaki Kamijima to help revitalize the community in the same way that you've done on Mount Desert Island. So we've got a fledgling mini College of the Atlantic taking hold in the inland sea of Japan on Osaki Kamijima. So that's a little bit about the story of the College of the Atlantic. I've spoken almost continuously for 40 minutes, which, you never give a college president a mic, they can speak forever. But hopefully that, without the slides, that gives you kind of an overview of what the College of the Atlantic is all about. And I would love to take questions from the audience about the experiences I had in Mongolia at WWF or COA generally. And I thank you for your patience. And again, I apologize for my own difficulty with getting the slides on board. Maybe I can send you the slideshow and you can share it with people who would be interested. Yes, I'm getting a thumbs up from Michael. Yeah. Please.
Can you describe the rivers in Mongolia?
Oh, okay, beautiful. The question was to describe the rivers in Mongolia. I can't. But normally when you think of Mongolia, what tends to come to mind? What's that? Barrens, right? Yeah, like either the Gobi Desert, right? Camels. Rivers are probably some of the last things that people imagine. But in the northeastern part of Mongolia, you can picture that kind of moving over to the Russian border, is a watershed called the Onon, O-N-O-N. And it turns out that the last sanctuary of the Taman that once existed all across Eurasia are kind of confined to this watershed. It happens to be that is also the birthplace of Genghis Khan. And so for the longest time, the Mongolian government, as they've gotten more and more into mining has been a real devastating impact on Mongolia. They've kept at arm's length from the Onon because it was the birthplace of Genghis Khan. And so the Onon is the headwaters of the Amur River, and again the Amur forms the border between northeast China and Russia, and eventually dumps into the Sea of Okhotsk near Kamchatka. But in Mongolia, picture endless grasslands, right? Picture eastern Montana with no fences and endless grasslands, punctuated by taiga. The taiga is the classic Russian forest of beech, spruce and larch. Winding, gin-clear waters. No overgrazing, no mining, no forestry. Very, very few people. Mongolia is the least densely populated country in the world, and absolutely gorgeous meandering rivers through that steppe grassland and taiga forest. And that is the home of Taman.
Is it sandy? Is it rocky? What is the river?
The substrate of the river is...
What do the fish feed on?
Oh, okay. So the fish largely feed on other fish. The Onon is chock full of trout, Amur trout, and so they're pescivores. They also feed on mice because there's a lot of grasslands and so you often have mice and other lemmings and rodents, and a lot of what we fly fish with are actually patterns of mice. So when you fly fish on the surface, you're not throwing little tiny flies, you're actually throwing patterns that look like mice. And so you're stripping your line across, and you're bringing this little mouse across the river, and bam, 10 minutes. And then the other amazing thing they do eat is cygnets. Like there are swans, beautiful swans in this part of the world, and you can picture their little 8 to 10 little cygnets come, following mother and father, and this massive predatory fish comes out of the water, and if anyone likes to fly fish, it is hard to compete with. And that was actually the inspiration for trying to save the fish itself, was to bring Americans and Western Europeans for fly fishing over there, paying a very significant permitting fee, and have that permitting fee go back into the local communities that do live along the watershed. So don't get me started about that, but that's what Mongolia is all about. Yes?
Let's come back to the Gulf of Maine. Oh,
Yes.
I love that diversion. Taking us over there.
Yes.
At a dinner party last night, there was much discussion about some of the proposed fishing, aquaculture,
Mm.
plants, I guess you could call them, that are proposed for various points along the coastline.
Yeah.
Is the College of the Atlantic getting into a study of that at all? Because I understand effluents from the processing are potentially quite toxic.
You're right. One of the biggest fights that we've had recently, again in Frenchman Bay, not over here, was...
Could you repeat my question?
Oh yeah, yes. The question was about aquaculture, and is the College of the Atlantic engaged with any of the aquaculture development along the coast? And I was explaining that there was a large proposal for salmon pen, what they were calling a contained salmon pen. It's called American Aquaculture. Of course, they were Norwegian, but they liked very much to try and give off the impression of this is just your local mom and pop. And I love Norway. I've spent a lot of time in Norway, but the Norwegians are industrial scale users of oceans. And what they proposed for Frenchman Bay was a massive finfish aquaculture. And so we got head first into that. not from a position of a NIMBY, even though some of the pens would be absolutely a mile offshore of the college's front yard, but for exactly the same, the reason you mentioned, Gayle, is the effluent of hundreds of thousands of finfish don't get contained in that kind of sack. And so one of the events coming up in the end of July is focused specifically on aquaculture in the state of Maine. We have many alums and a really strong interest in mussel aquaculture and oyster aquaculture and kelp aquaculture at an appropriate scale, right? For my preference, it's all about scale. Like, aquaculture is going to absolutely need to be a part of the economic future of the coast of Maine, especially as lobsters are continually moving north. But it's about scale, right? And in my eyes, and in the eyes of the biologists at the College of the Atlantic, what was proposed in Frenchman Bay was obnoxiously overscaled. Fortunately, the DMR has removed or has denied the permitting for that. But the Governor Mills, will be coming to the College of the Atlantic on Friday the 29th, and we're going to make sure we give her something of an earful, because she is very excited about aquaculture. And in many ways, I'm very excited about aquaculture too. But the speaker that night, when Governor Mills is going to be there, is Sam Waterston, the actor, right? Sam Waterston is also the board chairman of Oceana, which is the largest nonprofit dedicated to oceans. And so Sam Waterston said to us, I'll come as long as I can get Governor Mills's ear for 10 minutes and tell her about appropriately scaled aquaculture. So if you want to come see Sam Waterston, that's Friday, the 29th. We got 2 questions. I don't know who was first back there, but.
So is there an ecologically responsible way to do finfish aquaculture?
So the question is there an ecologically responsible way to do finfish aquaculture? And I would say yes, at smaller scales and contained on land. Land-based finfish aquaculture works pretty well. And if you go to Bucksport, I'm pretty sure that one of the ideas they have for the old mill in Bucksport is being converted to finfish aquaculture, but a land-based system where you can contain and treat the effluents a lot better. Back to Mongolia, one thing that we were constantly fighting was actually a push by the Mongolian government to start a taimen finfish aquaculture, and we were very, very worried about problems with the genetics and transference of genetic information between wild and pen-raised taimen. Fortunately, they haven't done that. But the short answer, I would say, is I'm not an expert on this, but from what I've learned, a land-based, more contained finfish aquaculture, there's room for that. And it can actually take some of the pressure off wild fisheries, which, as we know, are equally problematic. Sir?
So in addition to that, what are some of the other pillars of your efforts to lean into the ocean?
Oh, leaning into the ocean, what does that look like? So I mentioned for the past 50 years, we've been doing humpback whale research. We've humpback and finback whales. We've maintained a catalog on the fluke of these animals. And for a small little college, this work that started in '72 about identifying individual whales based on their patterns, on their fluke patterns, has really blossomed globally. And so I think one thing that we'll continue to do, and do at a larger scale, is look at large migrating mammals like the great whales. Another interesting thing that I'm really interested in pursuing, when I talked about kind of setting down at the College of the Atlantic model and other parts of the world, I'm interested in Senegal. And I'm really interested in looking at the Atlantic Ocean from a cultural, historical point of view, looking at the destroyed slave ships on the bottom of the Atlantic and the connectivity between the New World and Africa and what slavery did between the two. I'm interested in bringing more and more people from the most diverse background, ethnically, racially, and socioeconomically, and I want to find relevance for people to come to COA because of what we do with the oceans. And I think this connectivity between Africa is something that has a lot of potential. Aquaculture will definitely be another thing that we lean very, very heavily into through our alums and also through our faculty and staff. You know, we're seeing more and more sharks. The college manages 2 offshore research islands. One is called Great Duck Island. If you've been on a boat in that direction, you may have rounded Great Duck. The other is Mount Desert Rock. And Mount Desert Rock is a 3-acre hunk of granite 25 miles offshore, where currently there are 15 College of the Atlantic students living on this 3-acre hunk of rock 25 miles off the shore. And we're starting to see white-tip sharks out there now, basking sharks. But I think now that you've put another thing that a response to the first question is certainly both the oceans as a barometer for climate change. And that research platform out in the Gulf of Maine, the furthest point of land in the Gulf of Maine, is a really perfect place to understand how the ocean both influences and responds to a changing climate. Yeah.
My question was regarding the franchise in Japan.
Yes.
Where up here in Maine you have the 2 support laboratories.
Yeah.
Does this island offer anything?
It doesn't. Nothing like it.
So
Nothing like it at all.
starting from scratch.
It's starting from scratch, but some of the biggest challenge with, so the question was, I mentioned at the end the idea of kind of franchising the COA model, and one place that we're interested in doing it is in Japan on Osaki Kamijima. So the question was, does that school or that location have anything similar to a Jackson Lab or an MDI Biolab or an Acadia National Park? And it doesn't. So it's a bigger lift there. But what I'm going to say about that is the biggest lift is Japan itself. One of the reasons we're most interested in setting a model like this down in Japan is, if anyone has been there or spent time there, the higher ed system in Japan is incredibly regimented, right? The kind of education that College of the Atlantic is practicing here, that is hands-on, where students work collaboratively with faculty on project-based learning, that is the furthest thing from what typically goes on in Japan. So the island does offer many, many really interesting projects to look at. They cultivate citrus on the island, so agriculture is really interesting. The other link to Maine is they cultivate blueberry, although it's a high bush blueberry, not a low bush blueberry. There's a shipbuilding industry on the island, and there is a nearby island that is actually a waste site of toxic metals. And so there's interest in engaging students on these projects, but the hardest lift is probably working on the accreditation process in a system of education that is so highly regimented like Japan. Okay, sir, I saw you first.
Yeah, I'll share a little story. Last Monday, I got on the airplane in Bangor Airport, and a girl sat next to me, and just as we were about to take off, she's about to plug in her little ear, Apple things, and about to put the second one in. I said, "How are you doing?" And for the next hour and a half, I heard all about the college.
Nice!
She was headed to New Jersey, and another New Jersey person.
Yes.
Fantastic girl, and she told me almost every everything that you said, and I think she's probably going to be your next president.
Good, good. Not too soon. I'm not done
Well,
yet.
she's 20. I don't know what you are. But, the three things or four things that really came to my attention when she was elaborating with such enthusiasm were the size of the school, because I didn't know that much about it.
Yeah.
The size of the school, the diversity, the fact that you have students from, what, 40 states?
40 U.S. states and 55 countries.
So she said the exact same thing. And then the last part, so there are four, I don't know if I have a question here. The fourth thing is that you design your major.
Yeah.
Okay, so with all this diversity, the size of the school, how does this all happen?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, imagine the ideas from, you know, these kids from, what, 40, 50 countries and all this country. The ideas, like how do you support that with your faculty in the school? How does that happen?
That's a great. That made my day. That question. I mean, I couldn't ask for a better question, right? Because I do think that the students tell the story exceptionally well. And my wife will tell you, when I first met Karen, all I could do is talk about the College of the Atlantic, and she would be like, when is he going to stop talking about the College of the Ocean, or whatever it is? But the question of how you do it is a good one, because there are certain limitations. There are only 35 full-time faculty members, right? And then a host of adjunct and visitors. And so the way we do it to start is we attract the right kind of student, right? I think it's a highly self-selective institution. If you're interested in coming and studying accounting and getting your degree, and the world needs great accountants. This is not a poor reflection on that industry, but and you want to walk through lockstep about what it takes to come out the other side, this is not the place for you, right? So there's the kind of student is where it starts, and they're highly, as you saw, highly motivated. The way we also get there is we ask our faculty to stretch and be comfortable not being an expert. And that's hard for faculty. If any of you, I love my faculty to death, but faculty are a strange tribal group. My degree in anthropology has come in really, really important when working with faculty. But the faculty that come to COA are really willing to meet our students halfway. And they certainly have their own area of expertise. They pursue research in that. They bring students into the research. But they're also willing to conduct independent studies, tutorials, and group studies. The last answer to the question is, again, this approach that is project-based, right? It doesn't mean that we don't have classes. We have, there are degree requirements, and you have to take a certain amount of classes. We want everyone to be excellent writers, because no matter what you do in the world, I'm convinced you better be able to put a sentence and a paragraph together. But we rely a lot on projects as part of the classwork, and that gives these students who are hungry to get dirt under their fingernails, that dirt under their fingernails. And we also do it, again, through partnerships. So we're able to bring other warm bodies into the fold from the Jacks, from Acadia National Park. I'd say that's probably a reasonable answer, but part of it is you just got to come and check it out yourself. We have time for one more?
With about a 30-second response.
Okay. Go ahead.
Can I do my promotion? I was one of the bottom feeder instructors there. And I had the best time, and the students were so much fun. And trying to figure out what fingernail projects for these kids as a historian was, Todd Siebel Little is responsible for this. And it was so much fun to find projects where they had to go to museums to find the written word and use that research in some kind of report showing that they had gone to original archives.
Right.
And the things they chose to look at were fascinating. That was one course, and another course they had to build something because it was a science and technology course. And I had to invent them. They weren't like History 101. We had to create this whole curriculum. So it was a great place to be teaching.
It's a special place. It's not for everyone, but it is a really special place for a lot of people. Yeah. Thank you very much.
I think that Darron is a lot more animated than his 50 slides would have been. Hats off to the fellow who winged it in an outstanding way. Really a superb introduction. I think it piqued our interest. I'm actually going to be on Mount Desert Island on the 29th, so I might have a chance to...
Meet Sam.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. So before I give my final thanks to Darron, I do want to mention next week we have a very special island summer resident, George Stevens Jr., whom I'm sure most of you know, who spent most of his career in Washington and Hollywood. And he has written a book, let me get the precise title, My Place in the Sun, Life in the Golden Age of Hollywood and Washington. So his life is filled with friends and acquaintances, very distinguished people from the film industry, government, and politics. And he's going to be our speaker next week. Also, since you mentioned the oceans so prominently in your talk, we're going to have the former CEO of Wild Oceans later in the summer, in August. So we're going to be inundated. Inundated. Okay, so let me just finish by thanking Darron again for this marvelously stimulating introduction to College of Atlantic. I think we'll all be paying closer attention to what's going on.